From Synerger, this is Polaris. I'm Chris McNulty. The world of AI continues to reinvent traditional business process. Beyond productivity, generative AI has tremendous potential to accelerate sales and customer engagement in the business and consumer worlds. Today, we're looking at an example of how to accelerate that revenue flywheel with thought leadership and engaging content powered by AI. This is Polaris. Welcome to Polaris Pathways. I'm your host, Chris McNulty. Synerger is the transformation company, navigating strategies and leadership culture with ease. Today, I'm happy to introduce Zack Zeller, founder of ZZ Media, a company specializing in direct response marketing and AI-driven sales strategies. Zack has over 11 years experience in the field and has helped multiple businesses scale their marketing and achieve growth. He's got a great story, and he'll be along here in a few minutes. But as always, let's start by defining our terms and our data points. And remember, all of these will be footnoted in the show notes. The use of AI in sales has been rapidly increasing. Companies are leveraging AI tools to enhance processes and improve engagement. According to Gartner, 75% of business sales organizations will augment traditional playbooks with AI-based guidance by the end of the year. Microsoft, the AI powerhouse, is also addressing this trend. In March, they announced 2 new AI agents. Sales Agent works autonomously to expand pipeline, engage customers, and even complete a sale, while Sales Chat can help guide revenue teams to their next best action. Finally, they've introduced a new AI accelerator to drive CRM system migration and help with adoption. Content marketing is a critical component of digital strategy. A study by Forbes shows that 70% of marketers are actively investing in content marketing, with the focus on creating high-quality, engaging content to attract and retain customers. One thing I've noticed is that the traditional marketing approach of using blog posts and mass market emails to try to drive awareness by giving everyone the same information is really starting to break down. Much more focused distribution of meaningful information is starting to break through. And that's why being able to create your own brand and your own thought leadership in ways that you can adjust to the specific needs of your market is an important skill to have as we move through the 21st century. Okay, we have Zack waiting in our virtual green room. Let's go. And so today, I am thrilled to be joined by Zack Zeller from ZZ Media as our guest on today's episode of Polaris. So Zack, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much, Chris. I'm really excited to be here as well.
So Zack, where are you calling in from today?
Yeah, so I'm in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Oh, fantastic. It feels like you should have much better weather there than we have in the rainy Pacific Northwest today.
It's looking a little Pacific Northwesty outside, a little bit overcast now.
Well, I'm glad we can export that around the world, I suppose. But I'll take 85 degrees and sunny any day of the week. I'd love to have you kind of share a little of that with our audience, kind of what you're doing currently and the journey that's taken you here.
Yeah, so I'm Zack Zeller, founder of ZZ Media, and I learned direct response marketing the hard way by writing daily emails when I was in college to keep the lights on and have money in my pocket and get through school. Since then, I got really good at marketing and started doing it for other people instead of growing my own business. And I was working behind the scenes, scaling brands with people like Les Brown, Jordan Belfort, Jason Capital, a lot of the online coaching people. And then I rebooted my agency now to help founders and business owners turn content into clients using a lot of the AI-powered systems to make those sales.
So there's been a lot of tumult in the industry, certainly moving forward from 2020 with pandemic, with the impact that it had on so many larger businesses, sending everyone to work independently. And I think that opening up a lot more flexibility and fluidity into how people compose their own business. So what are some of the things that you think are going on in the marketplace that are driving the need for more direct marketing success?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, maybe not directly with the cultural and working shifts during the pandemic, but a lot of the way that the economics and the flow of capital was affected by the pandemic. What I'm seeing now is money was a lot cheaper back then, and everyone was at home wanting to basically be on social media and consume and spend money. And there was a lot of stimulus checks. And around that period, it was also very easy to get loans and get a lot of money from like the small business, um, the SBA, the small business area. I don't know what the exact acronym is, but now a lot of that money is drying up, and a lot of that is being seen in more competition in the marketplace. And so it's not good enough to throw your hat in the ring and be on social media in a time like the pandemic where everyone is really itching to consume and has that extra spending money, or at least they think they do.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now it's much the tide is receded, and it's much more about showing the value and being a lot more precise with how you market so that you're not just building brand awareness and getting reach, but you're actually speaking to the pains and the problems of your audience to get an ROI.
I think one of the things that's also been going on, obviously, is kind of the interplay of AI. There's lots of AI out there, and first, not all AI is created equal. And AI can help with many things, but I still don't think it's ready to fully do everything. There's lots of expectations that you can open up ChatGPT and say, build and execute a marketing plan for me. And then when you hit return, everything happens automatically. And there's a lot more to it than that. What do you see as the major ways that AI is sort of impacting that sales cycle?
Yep. So I think that AI can be used across the big three marketing points of getting reach, getting engagement, and driving conversions. The problem is that you can't, I think the most intuitive or obvious way to use AI is almost like as an assistant.
Mm-hmm.
You say, hey, I need this marketing plan, go do it. And that doesn't work with AI, at least not at this level.
Right.
And so the way that I think of it is you want to have a little bit of content readiness to give AI something to lean against. Like the way that I view it is AI is more of an actor, not an expert.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a lot better outputs when I give references to AI instead of just asking them to go through a task. So, for example, just to make it really clear, there's a few ways that I do this. So, it could be something as simple where if I want to have a really strong consulting proposal to a client, I would basically ask AI to act as Dr. Alan Weiss, who wrote the Consulting Bible,
Mm-hmm.
and say, "Hey, what are the components that would make a really good pitch?" And then I would add that information to ChatGPT or the AI tool I'm using, and have them basically compile a full proposal based off of that framework and the specific information I'm giving them.
One of the challenges is if you ask generic AI to do something for you, it's going to be grounded in internet data, but not the stuff that makes you you.
Yes.
One of the things I really believe is important throughout all three of those areas is authenticity, especially if you're a smaller business. Your brand is your product and your persona is the brand. And the more that your AI can be grounded in things that sound like the better it's going to be, I think, at being a force multiplier for reach.
100%.
Let's talk about that second one, engagement. How does AI impact engagement in the customer journey?
Yeah. So it's really exactly what you were talking about in terms of uniqueness and personality. What we're seeing in the marketplace is because it's so simple to use these AI tools to access everything on the internet, to produce video scripts, short form video, LinkedIn, all sorts of content, white papers, all of that. It's becoming very genetic. The AI content is becoming the pattern. And in order to stand out and get attention, we need to break that pattern. Mm-hmm. And one thing I've been saying a lot to clients over and over again is, if you do everything right with marketing, so you point out the problem, you hammer the benefits, you give testimonials, you go over objections, all of this classic direct response ingredients, if you don't have uniqueness, you're just warming up your audience to buy from your competition, because that uniqueness is what's going to shift that supply and demand curve in your favor, because you're not the only business in your arena, especially selling information and having these internet businesses. Mm-hmm. It's a lot tougher to have a structurally unique like moat around your business. And even having an information advantage is getting tougher and tougher. But if you can stand out with your personality and your unique point of view and how you can simplify things, how you can offer a disruptive way of getting something done, then that's going to it's going to break you free from the comparison of everyone else in the marketplace and make you an obvious choice.
The last part is conversion. One of the things that Microsoft, I know, has announced recently is the sales agent, which will scan your inbox and automatically close deals for you, which I would like to see. I'm not sure how that actually works. I think AI may be oversold as being able to completely take care of that conversion cycle. I'm not sure how much you agree with that, but where do you see AI helping with that part of the customer journey?
Yeah, I guess starting from the top, sales is always going to have that last 100 feet that I believe can only be made by a person. And this is for the more important purchases in life. Maybe it doesn't matter if you have a baby and you need diapers, and AI just gets you whatever diapers are the easiest by scanning the supply chain and, knowing maybe what your baby is allergic to. I think that's fine. But a lot of the things that we buy are based off of emotions, of not just what job do we need to get done, but what is that? What status does it give us? What belonging and identity are we buying into? And what does it say about us?
Right.
Just emotionally. And that's very tough for an AI to be basically pre-programmed with those set weights on such it's so personal and so almost ambiguous and shifting too.
What are some of the tools that you've personally been using kind of for that journey? I'd love to hear kind of what you've figured out are best practices there.
Yeah. So a lot of the time with AI, I'm using it to get better perspective or speed up pieces of the marketing creation process. So for example, when I was running this chat agency that we would talk to people on Instagram accounts with large followings to sell information products using video sales letters. Mm-hmm. And before we would send the video sales letter, we would play a little bit of hot potato to qualify the lead. And originally, this was during COVID, before we had AI tools. But as AI tools came onto the scene, they became a really useful database to basically shortcut the decision-making process for our actual agents and equip them with better replies. So it's something that in a remote working situation in sales, there's a high degree of ambiguity, and a lot of the guiding principles to help the team stay together are based on the company values, essentially.
I think that's true. One of the things that I've seen both for our own business as well as for our clients where we're helping with go-to-market is AI makes it possible for folks whose artistic design skills are limited to stick figures to start building imagery. And I think that can be helpful when it's decorative. But like, I really was thinking about what you were saying before about kind of the need to have emotion in there. And although we've sort of moved a field of the earliest days where asking AI to make an image gave you a lot of people with 3 legs and 4 fingers, don't you think people can still spot, though, some of the AI generated visual?
Yes. Because I see on YouTube ads different AI people that I can still spot it. I know I get a lot of messages from my mom about AI images or AI ads that she's really excited or nervous about. And I don't know if it's one of those things that as time goes on, it's going to get better and it's going to be used differently. What I've noticed with the AI images myself is I'm much better at the copy side versus the image side. And so because I have that know-how, I can copy chief the AI tools better. With images, I don't have that full vocabulary of, okay, AI needs to add more emotion by changing this color palette or create images in the style of Ghibli animation or something else, because all of those styles have different feelings. Like if I'm looking at a Pixar image versus Studio Ghibli versus The Simpsons, that all affects the emotional hue and how I connect to it. And so I feel like if you have a really strong vocabulary with drawing and creating, then you can prompt AI and be a lot more precise and nuanced in how you get better outputs versus just saying, hey, draw me this.
So we did an offsite 3 weeks ago, doing a bunch of planning for the year. Mm-hmm. And one of the marketing exercises that we did a design-led thinking exercise where we actually used a staircase. And I took about 40 images from our brand and media library. And we asked people to just say, like, the top of the stairs is best, the bottom of the stairs is worst. How many steps should I go up before I put this on the wall? And it was fascinating. There were some things that were like, people were saying, put that at the bottom. I think it's AI. And I didn't steer anyone because one of the ones people said they didn't like, this is an actual film photograph that I licensed from Getty of real human beings working. So let's be careful about that. And then there was a couple of images that were generated by AI that were more abstract, like sky imagery that people liked because they assumed it was pretty well rendered. Did you see the Volvo for Life commercial last summer?
No, I didn't.
It's fascinating. It was a 60-minute ad for a Volvo, for an electric Volvo, lighting a city up as it drove through the city. Gray industrial streets started bursting with life and plants and trees coming from everywhere. It was entirely generated by AI, which is true. Yeah. And if you look at it, and we'll put this in the show notes, if you just saw this between other commercials during a football game, you wouldn't think twice about it. But there were a couple of distinct things. First, it was done by Volvo's ad agency. So they had they had 50 years of brand imagery and car imagery and all the other motifs that go into that. And they did not just say, give me an ad like this. They spent 24 hours building a series of 3-second and 5-second vignettes, which they then kind of assembled in the traditional way. So I think AI has still got some ground to make up there. Let's talk about some of what you've been doing more recently. What are some of the client success stories that you're really proud of that you've been working on?
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited. I guess most recently tied in with the AI is I was working with Richard Vanderbloom, who is a authority on LinkedIn for B2B sales. And I worked with him on his new book that we're I worked with him on his new book that we're launching. And so I've ghostwritten books before, but I wanted to, with this project, do my manual process versus building an AI process.
Right.
And the AI process actually created a much better product the way that I did it. And I would say the big difference is because when I create books and ghostwrite books, I focus on creating a organized framework for the book first and almost treat it as a sales letter for going over who it's for, like where the audience is, what's their water temperature, where we want to lead them, coming up with a big idea, and then interviewing the expert to extract all the information. And instead of manually like writing it out, I fed it into ChatGPT and worked it chapter by chapter. So it had exactly everything that I needed, but it was done in a fraction of the time, especially with the line editing pieces, which, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really kind of zeroed in on, Zach, the work that you've done with helping people find their voice and, become authors. And before we kind of talk through that process, why should people even think about doing that in the first place, do you think?
Yeah. Well, my big thought behind it is there's almost two tracks that consumers are going online. There's the inundation of all of this short form content, Twitter posts, short LinkedIn posts. I mean, depending on which corner of the internet you're in, you'll see some sort of flavor of this. And then there's almost a countercultural element of this where people are gravitating towards slower sources of information. So they're reading more articles on Substack. They're more into books where they can spend more time with an idea and be more unplugged, and watching these massive 3-4 hour interviews, not just Joe Rogan, but I keep seeing news from YouTube how more and more of these long form podcasts are being watched and streamed on people's TVs. So there's the super short form content viewer and the super long form content viewer. And in terms of building a durable business and getting your message and spending the most time with people to build trust and goodwill, having that long form message be the foundation of your marketing is really powerful.
It's interesting. It's sort of parallel to when people, sort of fall back on almost nostalgic slow cooking. I know that folks I work with who are in their 20s, recently discover, hey, I like reading books on paper too. So it's an interesting journey, and it's one I know that there's a lot of work in it. I've written a couple of books myself, and I've done it sort of the old-fashioned way by actually writing it all. But I do think it's an important journey for people who are trying to find their voice. How do you help them find their voice?
Yeah, I would also say whether it's short form or long form, you need a really good foundation to be able to smarten your ideas down. So it's not about simplifying what you say into a book title or into a 60-second reel. It's about being able to condense it into a bite-sized piece that actually makes sense and helps people. Because a lot of the clients that I work with, in terms of getting their idea into a book, their problem is they don't, one of two things. They don't have that uniqueness. So they're not passing this epiphany threshold in their marketplace, and their idea just sounds very ordinary, or their idea is this big blob of let me help you with business advice, or let me help you get in shape, or whatever it is, and no one could wrap their head around it, so no one pays attention to go deeper into the process with them. So in talking with them, a lot of it to me is about really dimensionalizing their idea. And I have 3 steps for that.
Okay, let's talk about those.
Yeah. So the 3 steps I like to do is starting with the facts, going into their actual central thesis, and then ending up with their mechanism. Okay. So I take this from, if you've ever read The Goal or know Eliyahu Goldratt, he has this cool model where everyone's trying to get to the same outcome, and there's two tracks leading to that. The top track is yours, where you have some assumption or different way of seeing the situation, which leads you to take a different action to get that target. On the bottom,
Right.
your customers see it a different way, and so they're taking different actions.
Okay. In that journey, as you were saying that, I was just thinking,
Yeah.
It's also really important, I think, for you to help people find the right voice.
Mhm.
There's a tendency, I think this is the same as sort of classic marketing. You need to focus on the value receiver and how you differentiate. It's really hard to say, I want to be known as an expert in technology, because that's so broad, you're not doing anything. Is it harder to get someone to make that first step of saying, I can see that I want to be an author so I can establish more credibility? Or is it harder to get them to sort of change their mindset about what they should be talking about?
Yeah. A, a lot of times it's about procrastinating on the right stuff. So
Oh, really? So procrastinating on the right stuff. I've never heard those words used next to each other. Tell me more about that.
yeah, so if someone comes out and let's say they're a business coach and they help people like with everything, right? They're like, we can help you with leads, marketing, sales, fulfillment,
Right.
retention, all this stuff. It's like, great. You're not going to save the world with generic business advice. Let's come up with one thing for you to really pierce the market with and make that the entry point into your business so that
Mm-hmm.
we can come up with a book about what comes to mind. One of my clients does this with podcast guesting. And so we talk about podcast guesting. That's not super competitive as a marketing strategy. But when you start working with him, of course, for podcast guesting, you need to have a good offer. You need to have a sales process. You need to have IP and content around that. And so on the back end, it does look more like general business coaching, but on the front end, it feels unique. And he's become the guest podcasting guy.
Personally, I love to read books, so I really love kind of the work that you're doing there.
Yep.
So we've talked about that. As you're working with your clients and your prospects, I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about what AI can do and what it can't do. What are a couple of the misconceptions about AI that you've encountered?
Yeah, I feel the biggest thing is that people just try and walk up and use AI and it becomes very very heavy-handed. It's like the man with a hammer problem where you maybe can use AI to get a good outcome once and then you try AI with a bunch of other problems that you have and you don't realize you need to be a lot more specific. It's a lot more of an iterative problem. You need to add more context to what you're putting in, and it's really that fine tuning makes the really big difference between those generic AI outputs and really specific ones. So when I'm creating AI bots, I use a tool called Poe for that because I can
Mhm.
swap out the back end language model and have the same prompts. But when I'm doing that, I'm putting in like a 40-page report about our target audience as it pertains to our industry. I'm
Right.
putting in email samples that were successful before to model off of that success. And there's also the voice of the brand, like what language patterns do we use, the rhetorical techniques, the tone, how we do calls to actions, all of that stuff to get much better outputs.
I've got to remember Poe. I was doing some research on one of our clients' websites to see what the website revealed about their go-to-market. So I had a prompt that I crafted and just doing it on my phone. And I sent it to 4 different engines, but like I should have remembered to just use Poe for that. That's it's always great when I can learn stuff here as well. I'd love to give you a chance to talk a bit about what's something in this area that that like the audience might not already know.
Yeah, I would say so. The cool thing with the AI is that once it's teed up, you can basically create a whole marketing campaign or sales sequence from a voice note. So I was playing around with this once,
Mm-hmm.
and I basically prompted ChatGPT, and you could probably transcribe this and steal this prompt, but it was something like act as a like a New York Times reporter, and I want you to interview me about my industry. I want you to ask all of the unique angles, the credibility points, interesting stories, all of this to almost like create an engaging podcast based on this conversation and ask me one question at a time. And then it'll just go through 10, 20 questions, asking you about different insights, maybe asking follow up questions, doing a whole bunch of stuff like that. I spent maybe an hour or 90 minutes playing around with this. And then I just said, hey, great. It stores all of it in the memory, especially in ChatGPT. I said, great. Now I want you to follow this format or, act as someone to create blog post ideas or newsletter or LinkedIn posts or sales letter outline, all these different assets based off of that, because it'll have all the information it needs to from you. And a lot of times that's how I work with clients before AI, of like asking them their different stories, why customers come to them, all of that.
Yeah, I think that's something you're totally spot on. It's one of the core abilities of generative AI is the ability to sort of act on behalf of or in the voice of, or if you were this sort of person role, what would you ask me about this? That's a really, really strong one. So looking forward, what do you see as the next steps for emerging sales and marketing centric businesses? What do you see the next year looking like for them, and how you're helping them?
Yeah, that's the thing that would be very cool is I feel like a lot of AI right now is used for these linear marketing problems. Like,
Mhm.
I need an email sequence, I need a sales page, I need these posts. The the biggest unlocks I've had in marketing is really having that complex system, the full system, and analyzing it. So, for example, let's say I'm working with a client, we have a welcome sequence, and then we have a specific sales sequence that we feed into after. Maybe
Mhm.
we don't make any sales in the welcome sequence, but we make 12 sales in the sequence afterwards for every 100 people.
Mhm.
So, does that mean that the first sequence failed and was useless and that we should swap them? Or does it mean that because we had that first sequence there, the people in the sales sequence were actually more likely to buy? So I think it's really interesting to get deeper into that psychology of how we can have better framing, how we can have better nurture and multiple touch points, not necessarily a funnel, to create a very seamless sales process instead of just focusing on the conversion from the last touch point.
Yeah, I do think AI can also be really helpful at helping people think through, like, how do you want to A/B test something or do some of those experiments, especially if you're at scale. And I also know from talking to small business owners, they're actually really reluctant to do that kind of experimentation on actual real leads. But
Yeah. I would say I'd say A/B testing. Also, depending on how big the company is too,
mhm.
it's less about sales for the sake of sales, of answering how do we get more leads, how do we increase retention, how do we do all of that, and more about researching and seeing who their best leads are.
Yeah.
So we actually found that when we were qualifying our leads before even sending them a video sales letter or getting them onto a call, after looking at, because we were getting, we were getting 300 to 400 front end sales a month, which would give us, I don't know, maybe over 10,000 leads just reaching out to us and getting
Mhm.
into that pipeline in the first place. And we found that typically there was one question that we can ask to determine if they were going to be a buyer or not. Otherwise, everyone else would either ghost and not finish the process, or they would have like the same objections of, it's expensive, I don't see the value in it, I need to think about it, but they would eventually end up not buying. And kind of tying it back to the beginning, to really focus on marketing that brings in ROI, it's not necessarily about how can we reach everyone in the world and get them to buy. It's more, for the majority of the businesses, it's more about how do we get to the right people and sort for our customers that won't just buy from us once, but are worth $10, $20, $100,000 in annual or lifetime customer value, versus, continuing to spend a lot of money on customers that buy once and refund or have issues or just aren't the best fits.
So, Zack, it's been great talking with you about this world, but I always like to take our guests into the world at large. I'd love to hear from you about something that you may have encountered kind of in that world of pop culture, a book, a song, a movie, a television program that's really had an impact on you over the past month or two. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, so my dad actually told me about this show he was watching. It's called Primal. So it's like an Adult Swim cartoon by, I think his name is Gendy Tartakovsky. I'm not very good at pronouncing names like that.
I promise we will spell check it and put it in the show notes.
Thank you. So the show is really interesting because there's no talking in it. It's about this caveman and his dinosaur friend as they're living in prehistoric times. And it's so interesting to me because I found it engaging because there is no talking. So I actually have to sit and watch and pay more attention to it, which I think got me more engaged. And as someone who really focuses on writing and copy, I really liked how it was so different as not a medium, but in storytelling and in the expression of television and cartoons. And so it just made me think of like what other experiences are there where you can really like zone in and pay attention to like a piece of art. Maybe, TV isn't really considered a piece of art, or the majority of it isn't, but that's what that got me thinking about, of like really keeping people's attention and really telling stories in more powerful ways by using less.
Well, I do think, that is one of the hypotheses of a lot of Andy Warhol's work. The Campbell's soup cans are saying that art should be brought to the masses and you should expect beauty from everything. He's not suggesting that a Campbell's soup can was beautiful, but it's funny hearing you talk about Primal. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
So, Zack, it's been wonderful having you here in Polaris today. How can the audience stay in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm active on LinkedIn with Zack Zeller 22 I guess that's my LinkedIn tag, Zack with a K. And then I have a free gift for everyone at fixyourlist.com. So you can get into my world, read one of the books, check it out, and have a good time.
Fantastic. I'm really happy to be able to share that with our audience. So I've really enjoyed talking with you today, Zack. Thanks for making time with us, and good luck. I hope we can speak again soon.
Yeah, likewise.
We'll be right back. Up next on Polaris, events. It's a busy year already for conferences. Here's what we're watching. The European Collaboration Summit. This will be May 26th to 28th in Dusseldorf, Germany. Mastering your AI rollout. Synerger CEO Michelle Caldwell will present tactics and approaches you can use to shape your AI planning and pilot projects. Business Strategy Masterclass, June 17th. Synergy's own Matt Schaefer will present our new masterclass on how to develop and sustain business strategy with the Synerger Company OS. Recent Synerger research has shown that 57% of corporate leaders can't identify their organization strategy. Learn more on our website. Heading into summer, Synerger will be sponsoring and speaking at TechCon 365 Seattle. This is being held at the Seattle Convention Center the last week of June. Learn more at techcon365.com. We'll have links to all of that and more in the show notes. You can learn more at synerger.com/events, and we'll add more events throughout the year. And if you have an upcoming event you'd like us to promote on Polaris, please get in touch and we'd be happy to include it. Well, that's a wrap for another episode. I'd like to thank our guest, Zack Zeller, for joining us and sharing his thoughts on accelerating customer engagement with AI. We encourage you to check out our show page to links for everything we talked about today and more. Visit us at polaris.synerger.com. Send us your questions and feedback for the Synerger team. You can reach us via email at polaris@synerger.com. Remember to rate, review, and tell all your friends about the show. Follow us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Polaris is produced with help from Riverside.fm. Our theme song, Alternative Dream, is provided courtesy of Adobe. Additional music and sound provided by Indie Guy Records. Graphic design by Josh Brantley. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris McNulty, and this has been Polaris, a show that charts the course for business and technology transformation from Synerger. Learn more at synerger.com. See you next time.